artists. As you can see, I'm sitting here in the very good company of these gorgeous watercolour birds, British winter birds by Year 2 artists. And it's watercolour that will be our medium in focus this week. I'm going to take you on a journey inspired by British artist and writer and teacher Emma Burleigh, who encourages us to use watercolours in a loose and a mindful way. Watercolour really is her passion, and she says that you can start out by making a painting with no real fixed idea in mind, and rather let the watercolours show you where they're going to take you. So I'm going to take you step by step how you might follow through that loose, playful and open-ended way of painting. Let's take a look.
To get started, you'll need to get some things together. 2 pots of water, paper of decent thickness, some paintbrushes. Get a bit of kitchen roll or toilet paper too, and of course you're going to need your watercolours. I'm using major brushes. They come in pans or tubes, either is fine. Though importantly, you need to really mix up your paints. To mix watercolour pans, stick your brush in some water and then put it on the surface of the hard pan and scrub it really hard. Now I'm going to explore what I can do with watercolour. I'm beginning with making some lines, squiggles and odd shapes on the page. Can you stroke and wiggle and splatter? Can you use the side of your brush? Can you flick from the tip and paint just using the tip? And do you know, some artists didn't use brushes at all. The famous painter William Turner was even known to use his fingers. Can you try painting with your fingers, or the wrong end of the pencil, or a feather, or a stick? Even if you don't have a paintbrush at home, there's no excuse not to paint. Now let's see what happens if you let one colour touch another on the page, as I'm doing with the red. That can look very interesting. Let it move along. Bleed, that's the word we're using, bleed into the existing colour. That's so satisfying. Around and through and along. Taking your paintbrush and your paint for a walk. For added effect, what I also like to do is move the actual page around and tip it and turn it and see where the paint drops like to move towards. What could this be? Now for one of my favourite techniques. It's called the wet in wet technique. Here's how you do it. First you dip your brush in your water pot and paint plain water, no colour, just water onto the page. I'm making a wiggly shape, as you can see here. You could then introduce a colour. I'm doing this with blue. Put it on top of the watermark you've made, and maybe you could at this point pick up your paper and move it around a bit, but don't brush the colour. Let the paint move when it makes contact with the water on the page. That's what I love about this technique. The colour and the water will act together to do their own thing. See that spreading and bleeding and moving around. You could try using different shapes, different colours, more than 2 colours, 3 colours, and see what happens. Emma Burleigh, we remember, is a very mindful artist, and she talks about the importance of thinking about what colours you feel like using. What colours do you feel like using today? See if you can find 2 or 3 colours you particularly feel like using right now. Have you chosen? Good. Can you see? I've chosen blue and yellow to start with, and I'm adding in red. I'm going to play with these colours. I've not got any idea really in mind of what I'm doing, but I'm going to see if a picture starts to come out. I don't know what it's going to be, and that's what makes it fun and exciting. Don't forget about using the wet and wet technique where you apply water first onto the page and then add colour. And I'm just now using a piece of kitchen roll to blot up a few areas because they're very wet. But you could also do this if you want to make the colours lighter. Move it around. Now let the paint dry. This might take a few minutes or half an hour. It just depends whether it's a hot or dry day or a wet and damp day. If you want to speed things up, you could take a hairdryer to it and dry the paint just like you're drying your hair. Once dry, let's see if any picture is emerging. That's how Emma Burleigh makes a lot of her paintings, just by playing and exploring, and when it's dry, deciding what it is. Turn your painting upside down or side to side, look at it from different sides, and just see if you start to see anything. Do you see a face, or an animal, or a monster, or a flower, or a lake, or a castle, or a robot, or something else? What is it you think I noticed? Well, it turned out to be a little bit of a sunset upon the sea scene here. And if you do see something, you could use watercolour to pick it out and add a slight bit of detail as I'm doing right now. This time, don't make the paper wet, and this time make sure there's not too much water on your brush, because you want to be more detailed and you want your details to be darker. You want to paint more crisply, and use a small brush for this. See if you can add a few lines or shapes to make it clearer to the viewer what it is you're seeing in the painting. Eagle-eyed watchers will see that I'm not using a brush now, but rather oil pastels, and that's stage 3. Once your painting is dry, there's lots of ways you could develop it further. Emma Burleigh is a big fan of mixing in other art materials, and it's a question of what do you have at home. You could try with colouring pencils, oil pastels, or soft chalk pastels, and you could try collaging with tissue paper and glue sticks, or using a pens like a Sharpie or a felt tip or a biro. There's loads of things you could try. In this artwork by Burleigh, she's used watercolour and then oil pastel and pen. In this one, she's actually collaged with tissue paper over the top to make these female bodies. And then a lovely thing that she does is, and this is an image of a painting she's not quite sure that she loved at first, but turned into something gorgeous. And that's about just knowing how to use your colouring pencils or pens, drawing shapes on top to transform the muddle, making textures, drawing new details, making it more 3D using collage. This wild little forest scene came out of a watercolour puddle experiment.